Hi there, and thanks for watching our channel. Today we're going to talk about taking a trip to Greenland. And in today's video, you're going to learn whether you should take a cruise ship to Greenland and whether you think you should really go there at all. So let's talk about this. If you've never watched any of our videos, we're Jay and Tanya. We're a retired American couple. We've traveled for over 50 years. We've been to 159 countries and territories. We lived abroad for 11 years. So we've been around the block a little bit. And so trust us, we know what we're talking about. Well, you may not agree with us, but we think we know what we're talking about. We recently took a mainstream cruise line ship on Holland America to Greenland. And we're going to share that experience with you and share with you some things to think about before you take a trip like this so that you can tell yourself, is this something that you really want to do? If you are an older traveler like we are, you know that you've got three big constraints when it comes to travel: money, time, and energy. So at this point, let's not talk about money at all. Let's just assume that's not really a constraint. So the other two that you have to worry about are how much time do you have left to travel? How many places can you go? Where should you go within that time period? And how much energy do you have? How much health do you have? How much longer can you keep going to do this? So ask yourself, is Greenland one of those places that we should go, given those two big constraints of time and energy? Is that something that we should expend some of those resources on? So to answer that question, let's look at this from 5 different angles. Number one, is Greenland a top destination for you right now, a top priority? Well, okay, if you are recently retired, you never traveled, you haven't been very many places in the world, I would say Greenland probably would not necessarily be high on your priority list. There are a lot of other places in the world to visit first that are very interesting. I'm not going to say more interesting because it's all very subjective, but there are a lot of other places to go. If, on the other hand, you are a traveler who's been traveling for years, you've gone to lots of different places, and this perhaps is one of those places that you're using to kind of fill out gaps in your travel map that you hadn't been to, well, okay, then yes, you should probably go. Let's look at it from a second angle. What kind of a place is Greenland? Well, first of all, it's the world's largest island. Don't know if you knew that. 80% of it is uninhabitable, or let's just say it's uninhabited right now. It's comprised of ice that's as much as 9,000 feet thick, and has been there. Ice has been there for over 100,000 years. Now, with global warming, more and more of the ice along the perimeter is receding, and so that makes Greenland more attractive for future development. And we've certainly seen that. The U.S. has expressed interest in annexing Greenland for its resources. Greenland is a semi-autonomous region that is owned by Denmark. And as of now, Denmark has no intention of giving it up, despite U.S. interest in annexing it. Greenlanders themselves, of which there are 56,000 that are mostly Inuit, they're not terribly excited about having the Danes govern them, but they're certainly not excited about having the U.S. coming in either. They would just as soon govern themselves and be by themselves, and that sort of makes sense. Except that Denmark contributes about $700 million a year to Greenland, and that works out to about $13,000 per person, if you figure the 56,000 people who live there. And that money goes for salaries for Greenlanders, for all sorts of health services, any kind of other government services that they might have. And then plus, Denmark has now pledged 1.5 billion additional now for defense in light of the U.S.'s interest in annexing it, potentially. Greenlanders, if they didn't have Denmark, they'd have to figure out some way to bridge this gap in income for themselves. Well, tourism might be a way to do that, but it's not going to make up that much. Now, cruise ships do go in there now, and more are going. The latest figures I have in 2023, there were 78 cruise ships that called on Greenland. They made 173 voyages there. And there were, in 2024, there were even more, and now in 2025, there's still even more. And sometimes in some of these places, including the ones we went to, there were up to 3 cruise ships anchored off some of these little towns. So look at whether you should go to Greenland or not from a third angle. What do you expect? And what can you expect when you go there? Well, unless you're on some kind of an expedition, or unless you're going to some remote air base, which is not going to be for most of us to get there, you're going to be going on a cruise ship. The cruise ship will be out in a harbor or a fjord. It'll anchor or stay in place, and you'll take tender boats into these little towns. There were 2 towns that we visited on our trip. One was 1,300 people, the other was 3,000 people, which really is a pretty good size for Greenland. You get off of the tender, you walk around the town for a couple of hours, you get back on the tender, and you go back to the ship. And that's your Greenland experience. Some of the tourist literature that you read, some of it is really kind of hilarious. It talks about how, you can potentially interact with the local people and observe and participate in their local art and culture and folklore, and how vibrant the Inuit culture is, which I don't doubt. But when you have 4,000 or 5,000 cruisers walking around the few streets in some of these little towns, just sort of milling about, there's not much opportunity for any kind of cultural enrichment. And it's not that the Inuits, it's not the natives, that the natives are unfriendly. We found that they were just shy. They didn't make any eye contact. I sort of felt, actually, Tanya and I felt kind of intrusive, that we were intruding on their home. I don't know, I have no idea of knowing exactly how they looked at it. I sort of felt that they were kind of putting up with us, but they experience it, they're used to it now, of course, and this is the experience that you visiting Greenland will have, for the most part. Well, Tanya, yes, today we are in Paamiut, Greenland. Yeah, and it's just an absolutely beautiful day here in July. Let's take a look here. Paamiut has a total of about 1,300 people. And we're on this cruise ship. It has about
1,800.
1,800. So we've doubled the population here. It's a Sunday. There's not a lot going on. I don't know how much goes on here anyway, but
We saw a couple kids on bicycles.
Yeah. So let's take a look at Paamiut. Apparently, the different colors of all of these buildings mean something. So I can't remember exactly what they all are. Yellow up here, do you remember, Tanya? That means health of some kind. It's a doctor or some kind of health thing. If it's blue, it means they're a fisherman or something related to the sea. If it's red, it's either government or commerce of some kind. Now, I don't know what happens when these buildings change hands, whether they have to repaint them or it can only be sold to another fisherman or whatever. We noticed lots of icebergs as we were coming in.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yep.
Look how gorgeous.
It's very nice.
Lovely.
not sure about these color designations, because here is a building that is red, but it is a grocery store or another store of some kind. And I look over here, this is green, okay, and that means communications, and it says communication such and such on top of it, so that one makes sense. And a blue, yes, and we just came from the blue grocery store over here, and blue is supposed to be fishermen, and having, now there, yes, there was some fish for sale in there, but no different than any other kind of grocery store. Okay, well, we just spoke with a young woman from Greenland. She lives in Nuuk, which is the capital, but she comes here sometimes to stay. She has relatives here. So I got the inside scoop on the colors of all these buildings. She says basically they can choose their own colors. But she says, yeah, traditionally the color does correspond to some of the activity here. This young woman just finished high school. Nuuk has about 20,000 people in it. The entire country has about 56,000. So you've got a big proportion is in Nuuk. And she says, I said, well, Nuuk must be a lot better for someone of your age. There's a lot more activity. She says, yeah, that's right. She says, here it's pretty boring. I said, yeah, I understand. Yeah, Tanya just brought up a good point. The girl that we just met, she's getting ready to go to Denmark to go to medical school. I said, oh, you're going to go to Copenhagen? And she says, no. There were two other towns that were smaller where she's going to go, because she's Copenhagen, she says, I think it's just too big. And I said, that's a good point, that coming from a small place like this and going to Copenhagen might be kind of a stress overload. Another good point the lovely Tanya just brought up is, when you're coming through a little town like this, huge cruise ship of 1,800 people just plops all these people, all these cruisers into this little town, and it feels like you're intruding. It really does. It feels like you've just been, plopped into their living room, and they're very nice. The lady at the grocery store, the checker, I thanked her for letting us come to her town, and she appreciated that, I think, and said, you're welcome. But it's just it's kind of weird. So one of the highlights of Paamiut is climbing to the top of the hill overlooking the town, and here's a cruiser. What do you think of all this?
I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, is this a retirement haven? Is this a place where you might want to move or get an Airbnb for the winter or summer?
No, it's July, and I have on a bunch of layers.
Yes.
And a hat
yes.
And gloves, and it's July.
And it's still a little chilly, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And here you get a full panoramic view of the metropolitan area of Paamiut, Greenland. A fourth thing to think about before you visit Greenland, and this is one that Tanya came up with the other day when she was talking to me. She says, now when we go to future destinations, when we're planning our trips, she said, I want to go to pretty places. Okay, that makes sense. She wants to go to pretty places. Who doesn't? And because, like I mentioned before, we've traveled for over 50 years. We've been to lots and lots of different places. We've been on every continent. We've seen places that aren't so pretty. Most places are pretty in their own way. But, let's go to pretty places. Is Greenland pretty? Yes, it is. Greenland is pretty. You go into these little villages, and it is pretty in its own way. Certainly, when you go up there on a ship, you're going to probably go through Prince Christian Sound, which has icebergs and glaciers and waterfalls, and it is very pretty. So from that standpoint, yes, it's worth it. And the fifth thing to think about is a cruise ship the best option for you to visit Greenland? Well, as I mentioned before, going on a ship is about the only way you're going to be able to get there, but there are options or alternatives to taking a big cruise ship like we did, whether it's Holland America or Norwegian or some ships like that. I don't know if Royal Caribbean goes there, but I imagine they do, that these large cruise lines with lots of passengers that come in there, are there Are there other ways to visit Greenland and get maybe a richer Greenland experience? And I think, yes, there is. And that's on taking smaller expedition ships. And these are ships that, maybe have 300 people, 200 people, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but they're small enough they can go into these smaller, more remote towns. They can go into little fjords that bigger ships aren't able to go in there. And instead of taking tenders, you're on zodiacs, these rubber rafts. You go out to the glacier or to the ice or to the town, and have the opportunity to have a little bit more of a more I don't want to, everything is authentic, but to have maybe a richer experience by seeing Greenland that way. So, in conclusion, with my little rant here, and I hope this has been helpful to you in some way and answered maybe some of your questions if you're thinking about going to Greenland, is would we go to Greenland again? No, not this way. We would possibly go, like I say, in an expedition ship and go in zodiacs and that sort of thing. Although there are lots of other Arctic destinations that can offer this experience as well. Was it worth it for us to go? Yes, it was worth it. Now, you have to be the judge. Is this something you want to do? Just know what to expect. Just know what to expect. Like I say, you're going to be one of hundreds and hundreds and thousands really of people walking down these streets in these little towns. So I hope this has helped you in making your decision, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video. If you have any comments, if you've been to Greenland, please let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you in our next video. Bye.